Hello everyone, Stjepan here. In this video I'm going to do something I've never done before actually, and I'm going to do it because of, three main reasons. Firstly, I've been asked by a lot of you, both on YouTube and on Chess, a question about this, and I was asked how do I build an opening repertoire, how do I choose an opening, how do I get better at certain openings, how do I study an opening, how deep into an opening I should go, how do you prepare for an opponent, etc. And I'm going to try to answer all of those questions in this video. Secondly, recently I've been, I don't know whether it's the correct word, but I've been embarrassed by my coach. Coach, he isn't training me regularly, but we've had a training session last week, and he found numerous weaknesses in my opening repertoire, and I've decided to change things up. Sorry, because lately in the last tournament I've played, and in the one before that I've lost 2 games because of my opening play, so I wouldn't really want that to happen. And I'm not going to change my opening repertoire, I'm not going to change the openings I play. I'm going to change the way I study an opening, and I'm going to try and study in a different way and try to get better in a certain opening much faster. And thirdly, over the last couple of months I've been doing street workout sessions with my friend, and I've been trying to do several exercises such as the pull-ups or the chin-ups and stuff like that, which I've never really been able to do. And I'm weak physically, you might say, so I'm trying to do those exercises, and in order to do them properly, we've been trying to find a progression routine which would enable us to do the toughest exercises properly after some time. And I'm currently trying to think of a way to bring that principle into my chess training, and I'm trying to create a chess training progression which would start with easier exercises and then build up to tougher or toughest training sessions in a couple of months. So those 3 things combined, I've decided to change the way I study openings, and I would like to share that with you. But first, let's go over how do you choose openings for your repertoire first, because that seems to be a very popular question. Now, most answers you're going to get and are similar, and most people are going to tell you that you should play openings that suit your own style. Now, when you are low rated, as I am, when you are much higher rated, in fact, you don't necessarily have to know what your style of play is. You might like Tigran Petrosyan, or you might like Mikhail Tal, which are in principle very different players, but that doesn't mean that you should play slow positional chess versus tough, tactical, aggressive chess. You should combine both, and in time you will probably see what suits you best. Now, I don't think you should choose an opening according to whether it's aggressive and risky or positional and slow. You should choose an opening according to the middle games you get and whether you understand the positions or not. So my first advice is that you should study 10 to 20 middle games in a certain opening, see the pawn structures, see the piece placement, and see the ideas, and figure out whether you feel comfortable playing those types of positions. Now, for example, whether you feel comfortable defending an isolated queen's pawn, whether you feel comfortable having hanging pawns, or do you want to get into an endgame? Do you want to play with queens on or off the board? Do you want to have the bishop pair? Do you want to whatever? Sorry, let me just cancel the challenge. Whoever is challenging me while I record, I'm sorry for declining the challenges. I don't do that normally. You should do that. Now, what I play, which most of you probably already know, against pawn to e4, I play the Caro-Kann. Against pawn to d4, I tend to enter the Semislav. And with the white pieces, I play e4. I've only played d4 in 1 game. I've never played c4. And that might be the wrong approach, but I truly believe that choosing an opening repertoire and sticking to it until you become good at it is the only proper way to study chess. Because if you diversify too much, if you become a jack of all trades and master of none, so to speak. If you become semi-good in 10 openings, then you aren't really good at any single one. And I believe that it's important to have your own weapon, which is going to deter your opponents from playing certain things. And most people, even against me, some people who usually play e4 have played d4 in order to avoid the Caro-Kann, which you can't really say I'm good at it. I'm not good at any opening yet, but yeah, it's my main weapon. So I've already had people who are stronger than me trying to avoid the Caro-Kann. So I would advise you to choose one move for white. On move 1, play either pawn to e4, pawn to d4, or pawn to c4. You could choose to play knight to f3. I guess that's okay as well. I would just advise you not to choose any dubious openings. I don't know, f4, which, okay, it's not bad, but it's less good than the normal openings. So choose one of them and stick to it until you become good at it. Now, the general opinion is that e4 is more aggressive and tactically harder to learn than d4. d4 often leads to positional games with more pieces on the board and with less trades, with less pawn trades, definitely. And once you choose what you are going to play with the white pieces, the first thing I think you should do is to write down every single variation, every single line, every single opening you are going to get into with playing, let's say, pawn to d4 or pawn to e4. So that's the first thing. Decide what you want to play with the white pieces. Secondly, and let me flip the board for this, with the black pieces, you need to choose one opening for each move. And I think that's essential because especially at my level or lower, higher even, but let's say until you become a FIDE master, you really need to have a solid opening repertoire and focus on studying tactics, strategical play and positional play, and not worry about your openings too much. It doesn't really matter whether you play the Sicilian or e5 or the Caro-Kann or the French against somebody rated 2000. You're going to win if you are better. So you just need to get that over with. You just need to be prepared well enough in order to stand better out of the opening if you are white and stand okay out of the opening if you are black, because you have to assume that your opponent is going to know what he is doing as well. So if you are black, then let's say your opponent plays pawn to e4, you have to decide what you are playing against pawn to e4. Don't say, I play the Pirz, I play the modern, I play the French, sometimes I play the Caro-Kann, and if I feel like it, I'm going to play the Sicilian. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should choose one thing and stick to it, become good at it. So for example, I play the Caro-Kann against e4, and this is the only thing I play. In every single game where I've had the black pieces against pawn to e4, my first move was c6 because I play the Caro-Kann. Now you might think, well, my opponents are going to expect the Caro-Kann. Yeah, so what? I mean, you should be brave enough to play what you play anyway, despite of your opponents being ready for what you play. You need to understand that you have to be prepared better than your opponent in order to win chess games. And the opening is 10, 15, maximum 20 moves, and after that, whoever is the better chess player is going to win. So if this is your opening, and your opponent knows that you play that, you simply need to be good enough to not to lose in the opening, not to stand worse out of the opening. So choose one thing, whether it's c6, e6, d6, e5, c5, it doesn't really matter. You can play the Aliokin all your life and people are going to start being afraid to play e4 against you because that they will know that you're a maniac who only plays one opening. You're not afraid to enter that position against a player who is 300 or 500 points stronger than you, and it really won't matter after a while. And I think you are going to feel calmer knowing that your opponents will think that you aren't afraid to play what they expect you to play. So that's one thing. Let's say you play against pawn to d4. Choose one thing. Do you play knight to f6? Do you play d4? What do you do? Now, I myself play d5. I myself play d5. So this is what I play. And what is your dream position? What is your perfect position? For example, my dream position is the semi-Slav. So c4, c6, knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, e6. This is what I want to achieve. So This is the position I want. Let's say this is my Caro-Kann against d4. Now the thing is that in a d4 opening, after d4, d5, the chances of me entering the semi-Slav aren't really 100%. Once my opponent plays e4 and I play c6, this is the Caro-Kann. Once my opponent plays d4 and I play d5, he doesn't have to enter the semi-Slav. If my opponent plays bishop to f4, for example, I'm out of my preparation if I only know the semi-Slav. So I'm not playing the semi-Slav. That much is clear. So let's say I play knight to f6, my opponent plays e3, I play e6, he plays knight to f3. This is the Mason attack. We've just steered away from the opening I want to play, which brings me to the second point I want to discuss. Once you choose an opening, so let's say we are going to use my opening repertoire as an example. So I play e4 with the white pieces. I only play e4. Against e4, I only play c6, and that's simple enough. Against d4, I play d5. I never play knight f6. I play d5. That's my opening. And I want to enter the semi-Slav. The thing you have to do next is you have to figure out after d4, d5, what are the ways in which my opponent can deviate and not enter the position I want to enter. So we have to be ready for absolutely everything. For example, your opponent can choose to play knight to c3, the Chigorin variation. Your opponent can play, I don't know, g3, which I'm just getting things out of the top of my head now. But let's say your opponent plays normally here, c4, c6, knight to f3, and your opponent captures, after knight to f6, your opponent captures here. What do you do here? This is the modern Slav, and it's similar to the exchange Slav, so you have to know these things as well. The second stage of your preparation should be sit in front of a chessboard, put your dream position on the board, and then figure out what are the ways in which your opponent can attempt not to enter that position. That's key. So, okay. d4, d5, what can my opponent do? We can enter the Mason attack, we can enter the London system, we can enter the Slav, we can enter the exchange Slav. If I enter the semi-Slav, we can play the Moscow variation, we can play the anti-Moscow variation, we can play the Meran, we can play the anti-Meran, we can play the chameleon if I decide to play the chameleon. So you need to be aware of all the possibilities. The same thing applies for an e4 opening. So e4, c6, which is simpler, and there aren't that many branches. We are already in the Caro-Kann, but already here on move 2, my opponent can do several different things. Let's say my opponent plays d3, which is the Breyer variation of the Caro-Kann. I have to be prepared for that. The normal move is, of course, d4, but what if I'm prepared for d4 perfectly and my opponent plays d3? So I have to be aware of that, the Breyer variation of the Caro-Kann. What if my opponent plays knight to f3 and I play d5, my opponent plays knight to c3, the two knights variation? I have to be prepared for that. I have to know that I have to play bishop to g4 here. This is the best move, let's say. Okay, so I have to know that. If my opponent plays normally, if my opponent plays d4, d5 is the only move, and now I have to be prepared for several things as well. My opponent can play takes, and bishop to d3, the exchange variation. My opponent can play takes, and c4, the Panov attack, so I have to know that. My opponent doesn't have to take. My opponent can play e5, the advance variation, so I have to be prepared for that as well. And my opponent can play the main line, either knight to c3 or knight to d2, so I have to know that variation as well. So takes. Here I have to choose what I play against the main line. I can either play the Karpov with knight to d7. I can play knight to f6, and after my opponent captures, I can either take with the e-pawn or with the g-pawn, entering the Bronstein-Larsen or the Korchnoi variation. I can play bishop to f5, which is the classical mainline Caro-Kann. So all of these things I have to be aware of. My opponent can, after d5, choose to play f3, the fantasy variation of the Caro-Kann. You have to be aware of what your opponent can do against your openings. You can't just rely on your opponent entering your dream position. For example, against white in the Caro-Kann, I love playing against the advanced variation, e5. And I play bishop to f5. Let's say my opponent plays the short variation. I play e6. Let's say this is my dream position. Let's say this is what I want to achieve. But there is a long, long way from e4, c6 to the position where my opponent plays knight to f3 and I play e6. There are around 20 or 30 variations we could enter before I get my dream positions. So the thing I think you should do, start out with the opening moves. The first move your opponent plays, your response. You play the Caro-Kann. List all the variations that could happen, all of them. Once you do that for d4, the queen's pawn, once you do that for e4, once you do that for c4, the English opening, and once you do that with your repertoire with white pieces, let me flip the board again. So, okay, let's say I play e4 on move 1. What can we enter? What is my dream position? For example, I prefer playing against pawn to e5. I love the Italian game. So I play knight to f3. My opponent plays knight to f6. I play bishop to c4. This is probably what I like playing against the most in the king's pawn opening. This is my dream position, and I like playing against this. I think white has great chances. Of course, the position is equal, same as any other opening position, but this is what I like to play. And what I have to figure out is what are the ways in which my opponent can avoid my dream position. What if my opponent plays the Aliokin defense? There's one thing. What if my opponent plays the Caro-Kann? What if my opponent plays the French? What if my opponent plays the Sicilian? What if my opponent plays the Pirc defense? What if my opponent plays the modern or the Robach? List them all. You have to list them all. And once you've listed them all, you need to figure out what you play against those positions. You need to behave the same way when you're choosing an opening against pawn to e4. So against pawn to e4, I play the Caro-Kann. And after e4, on every response your opponent could play, let's say your opponent plays e5, you decide, okay, I play knight to f3. Now once again, you have to do the same thing. What can your opponent do? Your opponent can play the Philidor with d6. Your opponent can play the Petrov or the Russian game with knight to f6. Your opponent can play normally with knight to c6. What do you do against these positions? Against this, do you play the Roy Lopez with bishop to b5? Do you play bishop to c4, the Italian? Do you play the two knights game, the three knights game with knight to c3? List them all. And after you have done that for every single opening, for example, in the French, e4, e6, d4, d5, what do you do here? I myself play the Tarrasch, so knight to d2. And from here on, I look at what my opponent can do. This is opening preparation. Now, doing this will not make you a master of any opening. You are just going to limit your repertoire into something that you can actually study properly. That's something that you can improve at. If you have to study too many things, you aren't going to be good at any of them. So limit yourself. But be aware of everything that could happen. What are the ways your opponent can deviate? Let's say I want to enter my Italian dream position and I play e4, my opponent plays e5, I play knight to f3, hoping that my opponent plays knight to c6, and I'm going to play bishop to c4, but then my opponent plays f5. He plays the Latvian Gambit. This is a bad opening. This is plus 1.5 for white already. But if you are not prepared, you might as well lose the game. And I have a teammate at my club who plays this regularly in tournament games, and let me tell you, people have lost against him in this opening. This opening is plus 1.5 for white on move 2, but he managed to defeat stronger opponents. So be prepared for everything. Okay, that much about that. So once you have made the list of every single opening you can play, once you are sure that nothing can surprise you, you need to go deeper into each and every variation. Now, I've been studying openings one by one. I would get a book, I would get a database, I would analyze 50 games in some positions, and I would study like that. I've recently devised a new system in which I could, follow my progress more clearly and be certain that I'm making progress in every single line that could happen in my play. Because, let me use an example from a real game I played a month ago. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, I castled, my opponent played knight to f6, and I played d4. This is the Deuter Gambit, and I've been playing this for a long time. I know this opening. Now, taking with the knight isn't good because white can take here, etc. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Taking with the pawn leads to a very active position for white with e5, and after d5 I take here, he takes here, I take, rook to g8, etc. This is a very active position for white. The engines think that black is slightly better, but it doesn't matter. So, taking with the knight or with the pawn is inferior. Taking with the bishop is the best move. And this is a game I played against a lower-rated opponent who managed to beat me because I was unprepared. Now, in this position, I know this position very well, so you take. He takes with the knight, you play f4, weakening the knight. If your opponent plays something stupid, such as knight to c6, then you win immediately. I've actually had a game with this. You take with the bishop on h7, on f7, king takes, and you take on e5, and if your opponent takes with the knight, you check and you win the knight back because the knight on f6 is pinned. So all of these things you have to know, and I was well prepared. The best move in this position after f4, this loses as well because you take, and once again your opponent is in a world of pain. This is winning for white. So the best move is what you have to be prepared for. The best move is d6. You take, he takes, you play bishop to g5, which is the point of the pawn sacrifice. You pin the knight, it can't be defended twice, and you have a solid game. You have gambited the pawn, but your position is okay. And when I was studying this position about 2 years ago, I've studied this for, I would say, 10 more moves or 15 more moves. I was well aware of almost anything that could happen. But the thing is, when you're studying an opening, you have to be prepared for bad moves. It's easy to be prepared for the best moves because the engine will tell you what the good moves are, the opening books will tell you what the good moves are, the theory will tell you what to do against good moves. The problem is that nobody tells you what you should do against bad moves. And yeah. So, in my game a month ago, my opponent played b5, and I lost the game immediately on move 10, on move 9. So this is a move I didn't know. I've never looked at it because it's not such a good move, and I didn't spend enough time over the board thinking, and I just lost. So what my calculation was, and I've recorded the video on that game, you can see it on the Road to GM playlist. I've played c3, thinking that after my opponent takes, I'm going to take, and I'm going to have some checks on a4 and a very active position. The problem is that my opponent simply took. I took here, he took with the queen, and now I have to trade queens. I was completely blind, and I missed that queen to a4 doesn't exist. The move that I should have known, and which I would have known had I been studying the variation properly, is either bishop to d5, or even better, bishop takes b5. Now the thing is that after my opponent takes my bishop, which isn't really a piece sacrifice, takes, I can take here, he takes here, and I take his knight. The point is that he can't take back. So we are equal on material, six pawns each. My opponent has to do something, and the game will continue. If my opponent takes, then I take with check, and I'm just winning. So this is a good example of how I could have won a game which I lost had I been preparing properly. So yeah, in an opening which I've been playing for a long time, my opponent surprised me with a bad move, and I didn't know how to punish it. And this game is one example of why I decided to implement a new training method. Now, this is what I would recommend, and I would really like you guys to tell me what you think in the comments below. Let me know if this makes sense to you. I plan to do this for a year and see how my progress goes, and I hope I'm going to make much less theoretical mistakes. So the idea is this: once you've listed every single variation you can enter, every single one, and once you're sure that there are no surprises waiting for you in your repertoire, and you could achieve that in a month or so, it doesn't take that much time, I've already done that, you need to go deeper into each and every variation. So let's take this game, for example, as an example once again. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, castles, knight to f6, d4. And here is where I would start. You need to decide where each variation starts. the Deuter Gambit starts here on d4. So this is the start of the variation. This is where you need to begin your studies. And my training method now is, once I've listed all the variations I could play, to study one move per week in each variation. Now in my case, that is around 40 moves per week, and that's a lot, but I'm serious about my chess studies, so I'm going to do that every week for the next 365 days or 52 weeks. And in 52 weeks, if I study one move for white each week and one move for black each week, then in 52 weeks I'm going to know 26 moves deep into each variation I could play. Now once you put that on paper, it's a lot of work, but it sounds much simpler than when somebody tells you learn your repertoire 26 moves in depth immediately. So once you make a system of studying, and once you stick to your schedule, I think that progress is going to be rapid. So now what I would do, or what I'm doing, is now I have to study this move. Let's say this is week 1, this is where I start with my variation. What do I have to study? Which moves can black play here? So flip the board, and by the way, it's much better to do this over a real board, just to get a feel of what you have to do. Never use an engine. Use an engine after you have finished your analysis, and spend as much time as you need studying this one move. Now, since you have 40 moves per week, you could say that's 40 hours, and then that's 8 hours for 5 days. You don't have to spend that much time. You don't have to spend an hour on each move. It could be 5 to 10 minutes. Just figure out what the good moves and what the bad moves are, and how to punish the bad moves. So, okay, I would start with pawn takes, and I already know how to punish this. You play e5. So yeah, I don't have to go much deeper into that. If my opponent takes with the bishop, I know what to do. I take the bishop. I don't have to go deeper into that. If my opponent takes with the knight, I would take with the knight on e5. I don't have to go deeper into that. Then I would think, okay, what are the bad moves that my opponent could play? You don't look at ridiculous moves, of course. If my opponent castles here, I would take on c5. But are there any semi-bad moves, such as, let's say, bishop to d6? If I saw this move in a real game, I would think for some time. It's a bad move, but still you need to know what you do against that. So study each move that looks normal in a position and progress that way. So if you consider that your opening repertoire is going to be based around 40 or 50 variations, same as mine, because it's basically the same for everybody if you don't play too many openings, then I think this training method could definitely improve your opening play, but even make you I wouldn't say a master, but very good at your openings after 1 year of training. And I think if you did this consistently for a year, each week studying one move in each variation that you play, after 52 weeks you would certainly have a very strong, rock solid opening repertoire, which would definitely enable you not to lose any games after the opening. And the mistake I made in the Deuter Gambit against b5 surely wouldn't have happened had I been doing this for the last year. So yeah, okay. This is what I wanted to talk about, and I hope this helps. I know I went on a rant talking, and I've never done a video before in which I only talk and don't analyze anything, but I hope this helps, and I hope this answers all your questions and the questions that I've been getting about building an opening repertoire. Please let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think about my new idea for the training method. I'm going to keep you posted, definitely. I'm going to mention how I'm doing and how much time it's taking over the next year, but I hope that during the next 52 weeks I'm going to build a much more solid repertoire in which I won't be surprised as often. And another thing is that once you have a solid repertoire, once you know what you're doing, you're going to spend much less time. I found myself during the last 3 tournaments I've played in the last month spending a lot of time over the board in the opening moves, which is really bad, because I should already be aware of what could happen on move 5. Still, it happened to me twice that I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know what to do very early on in the opening. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know which openings you play. Let me know what causes you trouble. Let me know how you prepare. Let me know how you train, how you develop your opening repertoire. Let me know how deep you go into the opening. Do you prepare before a game according to your opponent, or do you prepare generally for your own repertoire and just feel comfortable going into the game without any extra preparation? Yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this helped once again, and stay tuned for more chess. See you later, guys. Bye bye.